Musicon's a little bit of a different story. This is another spot in Denmark. I think it's northwest of Copenhagen by about 45 minutes, and it's a former cement factory. It's 25 hectares. It's adjacent to one of the largest music festivals in Europe called Roskilde. That's about 100,000 people every summer. And I think in part because of that existing program, that existing use, when the city of Roskilde began to think about how do we redevelop these 25 acres of land, they started to think about programs like Roskilde as potentially being a possibility for a driver of development. And so they sort of talk about this term culture as a driver of development. And their approach here is to say no to the master plan. They're abandoning the master plan as a planning tool, and they're saying yes to stakeholders. They're looking to individual users. They're seeking folks who can adaptively reuse some of these existing facilities and let that kind of emergent pattern of use shape the framework plan rather than doing it the other way around. And they're really, they're really trying to figure this out. What do you do if you don't do a master plan? How the hell do you figure out a process for development? These guys are trying a bunch of different things. They're getting developers together with musicians and community producers, looking at plans, coming up with what they're calling a framework plan. They're exploring, utilizing the existing spaces in new ways. They're supporting users who come with a concept for one of the buildings, one of the underutilized buildings. They're creating a little incubation hub. Actually, this is one of the first moves that the developer funded, was this kind of office for incubating new commercial tenants. And so some of the users at this site now are a theater group who's taking advantage of one of the empty buildings and turned it into a beautiful theater. It was a group originally from Copenhagen, so they had a following that they could bring to this new site. There's been a variety of temporary art interventions in these fabulous industrial buildings. One of the first users was actually an ad hoc group that took over one of the largest factory buildings and turned it into a skate park. They've been so successful with bringing crowds, bringing the activation, that the developer in this case said, great, you want to use this space, let's clean it up, let's make it safe, and we support your activity. You can take advantage of this space and develop your own cultural program here. So that's what's happening. The skate park is one of the kind of biggest and most consistent user groups there that brings a lot of activation, a ton of energy to this site. And these are all things which are sort of conceived of as, phased in over the kind of site's build out. So I think some things like this art studio might be there for a period of years in a building that in 5 years from now might be redeveloped for another use. But some of the things will stay and inform the longer term program. One of the big anchor tenants in this establishment, this is the art studio, I think it's still there, this was a temporary art piece meant to just bring people down to the site and build upon the energy of Roskilde. One of the sort of big anchor tenants is this, the Rock Museum. And so they've managed to convince this cultural institution to come and build their project here, making use of an existing historic building and building a new structure on top of that. So it's an example of an alternate approach to site development that I think builds upon some of the story we've been telling and sharing about tactical urbanism, but here it's applied at a much larger scale. I want to just come back to the States for a second and talk about a project that Rebar worked on. And this is, so how many folks are familiar with the Art Place program? Art Place, or the Our Town grant program. Has anybody heard of this? I find it really funny that there's this huge movement among the philanthropy community now to support what they call creative placemaking. Well, who are more creative placemakers than all the folks sitting in this room, right? I mean, it's basically, it's landscape architecture, it's urban design, but somehow And it also means, in this case, engaging artists and the art community in taking advantage of the kind of role of the creative class, and recognizing that cycle of investment by artists coming to a space is really now, the development community, planning communities attempting to harvest that or take advantage of that feature and apply that to economic development in cities. This is a project that Rebar worked on in DC last summer. Kim Dragons from the Office of Planning got an Art Place grant. Art Place is a coalition of private funders that funds creative placemaking all across the US. They give $500,000 a year or more for projects that engage artists and designers in community economic development activities. There's also a counterpart to Art Place, which is Our Town, which is the federal counterpart to Art Place. They're doing similar work, but under the rubric of, under within the framework of the federal government and the, I can't remember the entity which runs Our Town. So, yes, the NEA, yeah, sorry. Kim Dragons got a grant to do projects in 4 communities in DC, some kind of underserved communities that were on the verge of economic development, and they created they went through the effort of creating a small area plan for this neighborhood called Central 14th. And they thought that, okay, so we've got a plan on the books, but what we'd like to do now is utilizing this Art Place grant, get artists and designers involved in taking that first step to kind of manifest some of the principles and the ideas in that framework plan and see what it looks like to make that first move. So Rebar did 3 events over the course of the summer. One was this Colorado Art Plaza. There's a long-term idea to create a new art plaza here. And so we created a sort of mock-up of that plaza over the course of a weekend. We brought friends, families, neighbors out to create a mural in the street. And we brought out some of our social furniture to test different spatial configurations. I think what I hoped this would do was actually test some of the ideas in the plan and see if that could inform the sort of longer term process. But I think really what this did was create a context for neighbors to get together and talk about what was happening, and for folks from the planning community to engage with neighbors and community in a new way, in a way that was fun, it was refreshing, and really built energy and hopefully momentum for the future creation of the Art Plaza. The second project we did was a street furniture design build workshop. So we did a charrette. We came up with some ideas about what types of street furniture would be useful in this community. We rented a storefront for a week, and we fabricated a bunch of pieces and then invited neighbors and friends to come and help us fabricate a whole set of street furniture elements that were then assembled and ultimately donated to local businesses. And so again, this was, is this having a major sort of spatial impact on the neighborhood? Probably not, but did it create a context for people to engage with one another in a new way and get excited about the kind of possibilities for the future of this neighborhood? Yes. And did we come up with an inventive way of showcasing the kind of the cultural richness of this neighborhood and bring people together under this kind of active creative placemaking? If you ever go to DC, go to Central 14th and go to this restaurant where you can get this incredible mambo sauce. This Korean woman makes an amazing mambo sauce, and Smokies. Smokies on Central 14th. You gotta check it out. We also use this as an opportunity to test some ideas ourselves about flat pack furniture. We did a flat pack swing. Sounds like an absurd idea, it kind of is, but there's no fasteners here. It's just all slots together with joinery. We created a set of, that swing also turns into a chalkboard. Again, instruments for flexible urbanism. The planters are also benches. It's a fold-down bench. If there's too much heat on that corner, you can lock up the bench, so you can't sit there anymore. But at least the greenery's still there. And yeah, so these are some experiments in instruments for flexible urbanism in DC. some murals. The third event was a art, food, and culture crawl. One of the things in the small area plan was an incubator kitchen. So we worked with local restaurants, and we did an evening event where they brought their wares out to the street, and people did a walk through the neighborhood, looking at different vacant sites in the neighborhood, tasting the food that this neighborhood had to offer, and hopefully building some momentum for the incubator kitchen in the kind of years to come. So that's what I think we have to share tonight. I'm interested to hear from folks who are, are practicing and in different ways, and how you respond to this. What's your attitude about creative placemaking? What are your thoughts about the role of tactical urbanism? And do you see this as a flash in the pan, or do you see it as actually something that's changing the processes that we're using to shape urban environments?